many of you have that dog vaccinated every year? All right, I hope it's a lot of you because we have to have your dog vaccinated for canines yearly, legally. All right, so how many of you know that every time you take your dog in to get vaccinated, your dog is risking having an allergic reaction to that vaccine? All right. Well, this is what I was studying when I did my internship, and I studied the relationship between allergic reactions and vaccines in canines. I performed my internship at Shiloh Veterinary Hospital from January 27th to April 27th of this year, and I interned under my mentor, Dr. Ruth Ann Baird. Some key terms I'd like to go over before we get into this PowerPoint would be, first off, anaphylaxis. Anaphylaxis is important in this because that's what I would be using to call an allergic reaction as well. Anaphylaxis is an extreme allergic reaction that occurs due to a direct contact with an allergen. And the next thing we need to talk about is antihistamine. An antihistamine is a drug that would be used to treat an anaphylactic reaction or an allergic reaction in a canine. There are going to be 4 primary vaccines I'm going to be testing in this study, and that's going to be canine rabies, influenza, DALPP, and DAPP. DALPP and DAPP are subcategories of the distemper vaccine, and distemper vaccine treats for the distemper disease. And the disease distemper is a viral disease that attacks the nervous and gastrointestinal system of the canine, along with their respiratory system. The first one of these vaccines I'd be testing is DALPP, which stands for Distemper Adenovirus Leptospirosis Parainfluenza Parvovirus Vaccine. Now that's what we call an adjuvant virus, an adjuvant vaccine, which is a combination of multiple vaccines in one. So in this case, there are 5 different vaccines. The next one would be DAPP, which is the same thing as DALPP, just without leptospirosis vaccine. And there's some belief among veterinarians that the leptospirosis additive causes higher rates of anaphylaxis when administered. The canine influenza vaccine will be treating canine influenza, which is very similar to human influenza, has the same symptoms with the fever, the coughing, and the runny nose, and it can be just as deadly as, you know, the great breakout of the influenza virus this year. It can be just as dangerous to dogs, so it's very important to vaccinate them. Rabies vaccine, as we all know, rabies is a common disease that everybody's heard of. It is a neurological disease that attacks dogs and can make them violent, and it's transferred through biting and other bodily fluid exchanges and can breed a fear of water. The last term, and probably one of the more important terms, would be mast cells. Mast cells are the cells in your body that regulate a histamine response. And this would mean that every time your body is introduced an allergen, your mast cells are the part of your body that will tell how much histamine to release to fight that allergen. This is important when we get into looking at the problems with vaccines. Now, canines can have allergic reactions to vaccines, and it can be dangerous because dogs have far more severe reactions than humans do, and this is because they have quite a few more mast cells than we do. So, as I said, the mast cells regulate histamine response, so since there are more of them, when they have an allergic reaction, they release more histamines. This can cause a more severe reaction. Sometimes they can even get potentially life-threatening. However, most reaction symptoms would be swelling, itching, vomiting, and irregular defecation. A big problem is that the symptoms will present themselves between 2 to 48 hours after the injection of the vaccine, and in most cases that is after the dog has left the care of the veterinarian. And unless the owner is well versed in what to do to identify an allergic reaction, the dog can go hours without being treated for a potentially life-threatening problem. The purpose of my study is broken down into 2 main purposes. The first one would be to further the information on how the different vaccines relate to the rates of allergic reactions in canines. And this is because there are very few studies on this topic. There are some that discuss the characteristics of the dog that would influence a higher rate of allergic reaction. And there just aren't a lot specifically focusing on the type of vaccine. The second purpose of the study would be to determine if the increased rates are due to chance or some other factor. So I'm trying to determine if they are likely due to the composition of the vaccine. However, I couldn't conclusively say this because I'm not able to eliminate all extraneous variables, such as a genetic predisposition to having an allergic reaction or something they ate prior to coming in to the vet's office that day. But I will be looking for a correlation. Some background literature that's important to talk about before we get into the girth of the study is a study that was performed back in 2005 by Moore et al., which surveyed roughly 306 different veterinary hospitals and took in data points from well over 1 million different cases of anaphylaxis and found that the most common type of reaction was a 1 to 3-year-old dog that was a male. However, they did look at different types of vaccines and their relations, but they did not find any correlation between the type of vaccine. So my study will be trying to build off this study as well. We're also going to be looking at Hines back then, who discussed that the 2 to 48 hour window was what we should be looking for when a vaccine reaction would occur, and the symptoms that occur are as such. So the more severe symptoms of an allergic reaction would be when the swelling gets so serious that the larynx actually swells shut and they cannot breathe anymore. And this oxygen deprivation can cause particularly liver damage and death. Liver damage because the liver is the organ in the body most susceptible to oxygen deprivation. And the last one we'd be talking about, DODS, which is, it discusses that the treatment for an allergic reaction would be an administration of an injectable Benadryl and a steroid or an NSAID. When we get down to the hypotheses, I have two different hypotheses. I have a statistical hypothesis and a scientific hypothesis. For my statistical hypotheses, I had several different null and alternate hypotheses that were just trying to compare the different vaccines to one another to really analyze the relationship. For my alternate hypotheses, I stated that one vaccine did cause a different, or did have a significant relationship to another vaccine, and with my null hypothesis, I stated that there were no relationship between that vaccine and the other vaccines tested. For my scientific hypothesis, this is basically just what I thought was going to come out of the study based on the different relationships, and I believe that the DALPP caused a higher percentage of allergic reactions compared to the other vaccines, and this was because of that preconceived notion that leptospirosis added to it makes it more conducive for a reaction. I had several research questions that I broke down from a main overarching research question, which was just asking, from the rabies, influenza, and distemper vaccines, how do they relate to one another in the aspects of rates of allergic reaction? And each sub-question just broke down how the rabies vaccine related to the other vaccines, how the influenza vaccine related to the other vaccines, how DALPP related to the others, and how DAPP related to the others. For my study design, I had an observational quantitative correlational design and method, and that basically just means that I had physical quantitative data that I looked at and I analyzed to look for statistical significance and trends in the data. This helps me generalize the results of my study, and it helps me have high external validity, which means that my results will apply to a lot of other cases and maybe even other hospitals. The procedure of my study was to first collect raw data, and once I got to this point, I ran into a speed bump. I had to figure out how to determine when an allergic reaction occurred. So I discussed with my mentor, and the best way that we came up with was seeing when the hospital recorded an injection of Benadryl and a steroid, because as we said, these were what they used to treat an anaphylactic reaction. So we discussed that whenever that we would have what we call a double injection of Benadryl and steroid, that would cause one allergic reaction. So we said that they were equal to one another. And then I took that data of whenever there was a double injection or an allergic reaction, and I compared that to the dates of the injections of the vaccines to determine when an allergic reaction happened due to a vaccine. The population of my study was all the canines in Cobb County that were administered the rabies, influenza, and distemper vaccine. And this helped me have internal validity, which means that my results are more likely to be accurate among themselves. The sample of my study was all of the canines at Shiloh Veterinary Hospital that were administered the rabies, influenza, and distemper vaccines over the past year from January 1st, 2017 to December 31st, 2017. And I made sure when I was analyzing the different dates on the double injection and the injection of the vaccine that the injection of the vaccine was prior to the double injection and within that 48-hour time frame we discussed. So if it was 3 days after, I couldn't count it, and if it was before, that also wouldn't be due to the injection of the vaccine. So when we get down to the results, I prepared a graph where you can see that the DAPP has the highest rate of allergic reaction to the vaccines, which is 1.2987%. Now, the study of Moore et al. Found that on average, 1 in 250 dogs had an allergic reaction to a vaccine, and that's roughly 0.4%. So this is almost 3 times as high. Now, to see if these results were due to chance or not, I had to run a 2-sample Z test, which is a statistical test that compares the means of two populations. Once I did this, I discovered that none of my results were statistically significant because my p-values, which ideally would be below the 0.05 that indicates significance, or 5% chance that is due to chance, or not due to chance. And I found that DAPP versus DALPP was the closest with a p-value of 0.0784 or 7.84%. I failed to reject my null hypotheses. Rejecting them would be the goal of this because I'd be able to find something more conclusive, but this did agree with Moore et al.'s study back in 2005. Individually, you can see that the rabies vaccine was not significant and that I did have to reject my null hypothesis saying that rabies does not cause higher rates of allergic reaction in canines. And as you see, none of these p-values are anywhere near the 0.05 that we need to consider them significant. The same thing goes with influenza, failing to reject the null hypothesis, and none of them being anywhere near the 0.05 we need. However, with DALPP, as you can see, the 0.07 compared to DAPP was very close to the 0.05 that we needed in order to consider them being statistically significant. And with DAPP, you can see the 0.07 as well because we compared them both to one another. Some recommendations I have for my study, if it were to ever be replicated or reproduced, would definitely be to have a larger sample size. If you could even recreate the study that Moore et al. Did with the 300 plus veterinary hospitals, it would help increase the validity of the study and help it be generalized across a wider population. It would help them be more accurate and show better trends in the data. Increasing the time frame and even breaking that time frame up into different years would be better because I was only working with 1 year of data. So working with multiple years would give you, of course, more data points and a more conclusive result to your study. And since vaccines are created every 5 to 10 years, splitting those up with the different type of vaccine would be mandatory when you do that. And lastly would be to find a more definite way to determine the occurrence of an allergic reaction. Because although the way we did discover with the double injection and the injection of a vaccine would be pretty conclusive, there is an assumption being made that it's all put down right and everything's accurate. And there is a chance that some of those aren't exactly due to due to a vaccine injection, and there is a chance that some of them aren't reported. So I believe there is actually a government source that you have to report some of these to, but I did not have access to that data. For my acknowledgements, I would love to thank my mentor, Dr. Ruth Ann Baird, and all the other veterinarians at Shiloh Veterinary Hospital, including Dr. Boggs, Dr. Lawrence, Dr. Hackett, and Dr. Martin. And all the veterinary assistants who really helped me through my process and helped me collect my data. And Shiloh Veterinary Hospital for allowing me to intern there and get to follow a passion of mine and really learn a lot about the field and be very hands-on with everything. I'd also like to thank Dr. Eden Hunt for supervising me through this internship and helping me make sure that everything went smoothly. Ms. Chelsea Sexton for grading my papers and for helping me through understanding the data analysis of it all. Dr. Engel for allowing me the opportunity to be a magnet and help me through these past 4 years. And my family for emotional support, financial support, and everything that I need in between. My friends included, because they're basically my family. Here are my references. Any questions? Yes?
In that year of data that you gathered, how many, from Shiloh, how many dogs were in that group?
In the group, we had over 56,000 entries. Of those, only 184 were of allergic reactions to vaccines, and with were allergic reactions, and so the double injections. And with the cross-checking of the dates, I was able to find, I believe, something around 58 occurrences of an allergic reaction in that year. And even while I was there, we had, sadly, 3 occurrences of a death from an allergic reaction to a vaccine. So, yeah. But by no means do not give your dogs vaccines, because they're very useful with preventative healthcare. Yes?
Do they make those vaccines separate like they do for human vaccines, like the DPTP?
Yes, but most hospitals won't carry it because it's just so much more efficient, especially when you have 5 different vaccines in one. Usually a dog won't let you stick them that many times, so hitting them once, and you will also usually be administering multiple vaccines at once. Like you'll be giving the rabies, the influenza, and the DALPP, so that would be 7 shots instead of 3. All right, anything else?
You would think that the veterinary clinic would stress the fact that there could be an allergic reaction because they never really say anything.
Well, see, I feel like if people got too spooked, they would not they would not give their dogs vaccines, and vaccines are crucial in stopping the spread of disease, because if your dog's not vaccinated, it can carry a disease and spread it to another dog. So it's not just your dog that would be at risk, it would be all the other dogs that it's in contact with. This is especially true of the Bordetella vaccine, which is kennel cough, and rabies, of course, because that's something that can be transmitted to humans very easily.
I'm just looking at the cats. Is that the truth for the cats too? When you do
Um,
vaccines?
I'm not sure. I didn't conduct my study on cats. There's a lot less information on it.
Really?
Yeah, I couldn't find enough literature to back up a whole study on it.
Really?
Apparently, cats react a lot differently to vaccines.
That's
Yeah.
Is there any approval process for vaccines for dogs or animals in general?
I know that there was a cat that came in, and the doctor gave the okay to not vaccinate it for something, but I'm not sure if there's any other checking process.
I meant in the development of vaccines.
Oh, I'm not sure. This is actually my mentor right here, Dr. Baird.
She's awfully two-dimensional.
All right, thank you.
What was his name?